time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Spent my day today at the state capitol in Harrisburg, lobbying for public transit. Something I think is desperately needed, something we need to be investing in, something that visionary leaders would go, we should have that. Yes, in an area where I'm at in the central part of the state, in a county that is the fastest growing county in the state, Cumberland County, you would think leaders, visionary leadership, looking towards the future, what's coming down the road instead of what's just slapping you in the face right now. Transit, one of those things that I've said many times we need to be looking at, because you can only build so many roads and bridges in the spaces that are available. We need to use things better. I've always been a big fan of ensuring that people have options. I would love nothing more than to be able to get to work back and forth on public transit. But as I was talking to the state senator's legislative aide, and again, it was a Republican aide and it shouldn't matter, but the responses that were thrown back and the comments that were back and forth and the sense that nothing's going to get done really frustrated me. And it's frustrated me in this place where we've got this broken political system where something like public transit should not be this political. The idea of investing in the future shouldn't be this political. The argument for public transit is a smart one. The size of the population is growing. I don't know if you've noticed, it was really freaking hot today. Climate change is a problem. We could solve some of those problems by getting some of the cars off Now, we're not forcing people. It's not saying, no, you only have that option. But we're giving people choices. Where I grew up in Cleveland, we had a robust public transit system. You could hop on the bus and get pretty much anywhere you wanted to go around the city. You wanted to jump on the rapid transit, take you right downtown. You could go to the ball games, to the restaurants, to all of those things, and not have to worry about parking or any of the things that come along with having to drive into a city. We don't have that where I'm at. The transit system here is not great. Investment in this would be a good idea. But again, it comes back to this idea of our broken political system. And I couldn't help getting away from that, because while I was in the car, I flipped on right-wing radio, and while the blathering was going on, I heard about how Tucker Carlson was evidently a whistleblower told him, or was it a whistleblower told somebody who told somebody who told somebody who told, eventually then did tell him. I'm not quite sure how the story goes, but according to Tucker, the NSA has been monitoring him. And the NSA came out today and go, no, we're not. We haven't done that. Official statement. That's fairly rare. Because look, this is a diversion tactic. Oh no, they're watching Tucker Carlson. Nobody cares what Tucker Carlson's saying. Nobody. In fact, he's even telling you that he's not news, he's entertainment. But that was one of the first stories I heard about. I'm going, that's odd. And then the real divisive stuff. Why isn't Joe Biden doing anything about the crime surge? And then they show this graphic that I've seen all over the place of how from May of 2020 to May of 2021, Atlanta saw a 58% increase in homicides and a 40% increase in shootings. And I'm going, I'll be honest, I would have thought it'd been higher. New York had a 13% increase in homicides, 64% increase in shootings. And I'm like, I'd have thought it'd have been higher. Same thing with Chicago. Chicago had a 5% increase in homicides and 18% in shooting. And I'm going, again, thought it had been higher. And you go, well, why, Rick? Why would you think that would have been higher from May of 2020 to May of 2021? Well, I would have thought that since everyone was locked in their homes, we were on massive lockdown across this country. There was nobody really out and about, that crime would have really dropped. And it did. We weren't criming as much during the global pandemic. So then when things open up and people are back to, somewhat near normal, crimes are going to happen. But this is a failure of Joe Biden. Joe Biden allowed these crimes. He encouraged these crimes. That's the mantra. And again, this is about keeping us divided. This is about continuing to split that political gulf, to keep us, basically yelling at each other without thinking about, holy moly, it's hot and it's going to get worse because we're not addressing climate change. So I'm listening a little more and then was not disappointed. Critical race theory was thrown out, had to do the scare the white people thing. And they didn't they didn't they didn't disappoint. They scared the white people because we're gonna be talking about race. And then came, you know what's coming next. The Democrats want to do away with the suburbs. I'm going, what the? And I look at this stuff and I'm going, who listens to this? Sad reality is I know lots of people do, because the right wing knows how to throw out the red meat. They know how to scare the bejesus out of people. And then when you're not scaring them, you're ticking them off. The woke military. That again came up, the woke military. They're ruining our military. Eventually they won't even allow flags on the uniform, I think one idiot said. And I'm going, I don't get it. We've got real problems in this country. We had a condo in Florida collapse. Our infrastructure is in desperate need of investment. Did I mention it was really stinking hot today? Yesterday we talked about the people in Philadelphia and other places that have to rely on the good-hearted people who put food on refrigerators on the street corner so that they can feed themselves. We've got homeless people in this heat. And yet what we're talking about is, that they're going to ruin our schools with critical race theory. And yet not one of them can explain really what it is. In fact, there are law students who can't even tell you what it is. And I just got this sense of, just almost despair. That are we going to be able to meet the challenges of the future? We used to in this country. We used to push the bounds of technological capabilities. Our infrastructure was always pushing the bounds of possible. Our government in our space program and things always pushing the bounds of possible. Our educational institutions pushing the bounds of what was on the cutting edge, striving for what's next, striving to how to make lives better, striving in how to change things for the better. And I spent a good portion of today listening to people who simply want to return to an era that never was, and destroy what's already been built, because it's not, we haven't made America great yet. And then losing their ever-loving freaking minds over, some hammer thrower who looked angry during the playing of the national anthem. And that's what kept people all knotted up. And if you're in that state of tizzy, you're in that state of anger or fear, this is what the right wing does masterfully. They want to scare you. They want to make you angry so that you're not thinking about the reality that every day we're being ripped off. Every day the working class majority in this country is getting the screw jobs. I think I talked about this not too long ago. I was in a group of, a sizable group of working people, and there was, a discussion going on, and the argument was over, those lazy people will go back to work. And I'm going, would you? Now, these are people who have really good jobs. making 25, 30 bucks an hour. These are people who are doing really well for themselves. Looking at someone making minimum wage, $7.25, maybe $10 an hour, and going, they're lazy for not going back to a subpar job. And the disconnect is what I struggled with. This idea that, well, those lazy people who won't do the jobs that I wouldn't do for the wages that they're being paid, somehow it's their fault. And the right has done a masterful job in this. I always go back to the Jay Gould quote, a railroad magnate from the 1880s who said, "I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half." We see that played out. We see that played out often because that's how that divide and conquer is how the wealth class has been able to attain such enormous wealth, such incredible power. I used to always believe that, the rich people have all the money. They do. They've got the money. But we outprocreated them. There are more of us. And if we were smarter, we could rule the world. The fact that we can't get simple infrastructure bill passed through really fast to get our infrastructure rebuilt, but two, the jobs that come with it. And those are good jobs that people could make a living on. The fact that it takes this long to get that, but a tax cut they can do, well, really quickly, is mind-blowing to me. And this is where I keep coming back to. I try to get past the political divide where I can. My goal, my mantra, my thought process has always been, how do we get things done? I've grown up with this working class ethic that you got to accomplish something. There's got to be something at the end of your day's labor. And I sit and I listen to these right-wing programs who at the end of their day, all they did was sow division and anger and hatred. And where my mindset is, look, we got to get things done. We don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time to change our culture in a way that addresses climate change. And you go, well, Rick, we can't do anything about climate change until we do something about China. And I agree. But stopping doing what you're doing because you can't get China to come into line is kind of ridiculous. I mean, the logic that they throw out at us is kind of that you get from like a 3-year-old who just wants the candy or the cookie from the jar. This is sadly who's been running the messaging, the narratives of this country for way too long. And it's not to make things better. It's not to make you happier. It's not to make your lives better. It's not to make your kids have better opportunities. It's about none of that. It's about keeping us pitted against each other for one reason. So that the wealth class can continue to rob us blind at every opportunity. One of the things that they said at the transit rally today was we need to tax rich people at a higher rate. And I agree with that. We can go through the history of what the top rates were that rich people paid throughout the history of our country. People point to the 1950s as the golden era of the U.S., where the top marginal tax rate was 92%. Corporate America paid 56% tax. Now you're talking corporate America, 21%. Top rate was 36, 37. And then they get away with not paying anything because, well, they don't realize any of the gains off of their capital gains and they don't pay any tax anyway. We used to tax rich people at a really high rate and then take that money and use it for the things that we needed. Massive infrastructure plans like they did during the Eisenhower years. A space program like they did during the Kennedy years. We had our wars, paid for our wars. We did that. We didn't have generational debt because we taxed the rich people. Why? Why do you tax the rich people? And I had a guy say, well, why do you want to tax the rich people? And I go, because they have the money. Hello? You're not going to be able to tax the person who needs public transit because they're broke. They need this. They need to get the jobs. They can't afford a car. They need the investment, and we need the investment. And it just got me into this weird kind of place that you sit back and in awe, really, of how well the wealthy have been able to divide us. How well we've identified. And I've often said it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome. We identify with our captors. We now feel sorry for the wealthy, which is weird to me, because they have spent so much time, energy, and resource. And again, I give them credit for being committed long term to dominating our media culture, to dominating our educational systems, while then simultaneously saying the liberal media, liberal colleges, where you can't find a liberal economics professor in this country. But they're all liberals. They're all woke because they want to keep us afraid and divided. And once you start breaking down some of that stuff and you go, well, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. Maybe you have the ability to get past it. I have great hope. I do. I'm hopeful that we wake up as Trump becomes irrelevant, and it looks more and more like the former guy is becoming more irrelevant as he goes on these weird, bizarre screeds, that maybe there's a point where we can go, okay, we had a moment, had a little hiccup, got a little crazy. How do we get things done? And for me, that's where everything starts. How do we get things done? I'm not in this for political points. I'm not in this for I won the argument. I'm not in this for my side got better. I'm in this to how do we get things done? As a union guy, I'm all into how do we make people's lives better? How do we make their standard of living better? How do we make their health security better? How do we make their retirement security better? How do we make their jobs pay better, safer? How do we do those things? How, again, back to what I said, how do we get things done? Our political system right now is all in how not to get anything done, how not to do anything or be responsible for anything that actually moves forward. We score the game on who can destroy the most. We've got a bunch of destroyers who tell you they don't believe in government. They don't believe government should or can do anything. And then when they mire us in this gridlock, they say, see, doesn't work. It's kind of crazy. So the question is, when do we stop putting up with it? And when do we say, we just want to get things done? It's kind of where I'm at. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day SWAC leader Philip Murray beat back reports that the Little Steel strike had collapsed. Even as the steel companies were championing that the strike had been broken, Murray insisted that of the 90,000 workers involved, only 20,000 had returned to work in the mills that stretched across 7 states. He added they were mostly supervisors and foremen and not production workers. Murray leveled charges against Ohio Governor Martin Davey that the Ohio National Guard was being used as company police to smash the strike. Strike leaders added that the companies were staging dummy back-to-work parades. In fact, Labor Secretary Perkins had announced that it was the government's effort at mediation that had collapsed. But the steel magnates were on the offensive and had the backing of local politicians and police. George Mike, a union man and disabled veteran, was the latest casualty in the anti-labor war. He was killed the day before at Maltrup Steel in Beaver Falls, Ohio, as picketers clashed with deputy sheriffs. In Indiana, police rushed to plant gates at Inland Steel to guard against new battles as 20,000 strikers prepared for the imminent forced reopenings of Inland Steel and Youngstown Sheet and Tube there. Both mills remained closed for weeks. In Warren, Ohio, police issued a warrant for CIO strike leader Gus Hall and 2 other strike leaders on charges that he was the brains behind a terrorist plot to blow up strike-bound steel mills. And at Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 2 separate dynamitings destroyed main water supplies, causing an immediate end to an attempted back-to-work movement there. The strike was far from over. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, today you had a bunch of people show up at the Pennsylvania State Capitol saying, look, we need to make sure that we have access to good quality public transit. We need to make sure that people have the ability to get what they need when they need it. And we need to invest in it. And to me, seems like a sane and rational direction that we need to go. And here to share some thoughts on the day's rallies. We'll see if this is going to get through. I've asked Dave Kaczmarek to come talk with us. Dave is the president of ATU Local 168. Dave, thanks for taking time for us. Yeah, we're not getting Dave. Give him a call and see if we can get him on the phone. Thanks. You gotta love technology when it bites you in the behind. But we'll get Dave here in a second. But here's the thing. The reality is we need to most certainly have the ability to get people to and from work. We need to move people around. We need to do a lot of stuff. So I guess we got Dave on the phone. So let's go back to him. No, I guess not. I'm giving the no. We can't do that. Evidently, is Dave there? Finally got Dave. Dave, how are you, man?
I'm good, Rick. How are you?
I am good. I appreciate you taking time for us. So the big rally today, I thought a good turnout. Folks came out to say, look, we want to make sure that we are investing in the future. Walk me through some of the demands that you guys are making in this Transit for All PA push that you're making.
Well, we're looking for some dedicated funding. We have Act 89, which is the funding currently for transit right now, and it's going to sunset next year. We also get some of our funding from the Turnpike money, and that is also sunsetting next year. So as far as our funding goes, we need a dedicated source to fund transit and infrastructure and the things that are needed.
Yeah. Now, when people think of public transportation, you think of big cities. You think of Philly. You think of New York. You think of Cleveland. You think of big cities. Central Pennsylvania, where I'm from, usually not top of the mind, but I would argue in a place like Central PA that is growing at a rapid pace, we need to start thinking visionary down the line of how we're going to get people to work, how we're going to get people moving around, especially with the limited infrastructure that we have. How are you going to deal with the growth?
Absolutely, and we just went through it with COVID. We were on the front lines through the whole pandemic, and we're still on the front lines. And we were bringing healthcare workers to the hospitals. Bringing the frontline workers to where they had to be, paramedics, everything else. And as far as that goes, it's in the rural areas that we're in, it's very important that seniors have access to health care, and it drives commerce, it drives business because it gives them a larger pool of employees to choose from. It's a very, very important transit.
No, absolutely. And as I read something, from the economic standpoint, every dollar that I read this, every dollar that you invest in public transit, the return is like $6 return on investment.
$5, yes. It's a $5 economic return on investment for every dollar that's invested in transit. For every bus that's on the road, Rick, we have a reduction of 60 vehicles. So every bus we can put on the road, we have a reduction of 60 vehicles, which means, we have climate initiatives that, we're trying to reach through the Wolf administration and through the Biden administration. And, these goals are important, and transit is a big piece of that.
But for me, the other part of this is, I don't know about you today, but today was really hot for me. It was stinking hot standing outside, and climate change is a very real thing. For me, the beginning of addressing some of our climate issues is, getting as many people out of their cars and having alternate modes of transportation to get them to the work, to get them to, to commerce centers, to, wherever, to get people around and do it in a much more efficient way. So for me, this isn't so much a build for today or tomorrow, but down the road in the future, where we're going to most certainly be at a critical mass point where we've got to do something, and we got to do it immediately.
Yes, no doubt about that. And, we're constantly, through our international president with the Amalgamated Transit Union, President John Costa, working so close with the Biden administration. And, looking down the road, we're looking at electric buses, anything that can change as you see what the last couple of days, how hot it's been in the West and here. Anything that we could do to cut down on that carbon footprint, we need to do it, and we need to start doing it now.
Now, the other part of this is, that's the positive part of it. The other positive is you're talking about a lot of good jobs. You're talking about people being able to support their families and the jobs that you guys represent, and the jobs that come out of building this system, and the creation of all kinds of entrepreneurial opportunities that come with high density living and the kind of things that spring up around transit centers. Is that something that's being focused on, or are we just sticking with, we need to keep people moving around?
No, the job impact is huge in the areas, everything from mechanics to office personnel in the transit centers to bus drivers. And as far as businesses go, you want to locate your business somewhere where your employees can get to work. And, without transit, I'll tell you, a lot of them can't get to work. It cuts down your pool. And, with transit in the area, it's just so much easier. And it drives the economy, like you said before, for every dollar spent, it's $5 return to the on the economic impact of it.
So as you guys were doing the lobbying today, because today was a lobbying day as well as a rally day, what kind of responses did you get from the legislatures and their staffers?
Well, most of the legislatures were gone after passing the budget, but their staffers, were very interested in what we had to say. And, sometimes the staffers are the ones that are in the ears of the legislators, and they're the ones that, that you need to talk to and you need to convince, and they turn around and they tell them, this is an important thing. And, we gave them a couple packets that are driving our initiative and things of that nature. And, the response was all favorable, straight across the board.
Yeah. Now, I talked about it in the opening, how, we're in this weird world of political divides, and how, we've staked our flag in the ground and we're one side or the other. To me, this seems like should be a nonpartisan issue. We want people to be able to get to work. We want employers to come to our community to take advantage of the infrastructure that we've built. And while we're doing a whole bunch of infrastructure with this next plan, shouldn't we incorporate that rebuild with a new vision of public transit as part of it? To me, it's that kind of long vision. But sadly, it's gotten tied up, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in being a mired political issue.
It has, and you couldn't be more correct with your thoughts. And unfortunately, it seems like everything seems to get tied up anymore into being a political issue. And, this is something that really shouldn't be. The impact of this on, our seniors and just, so many people in the community, you would think it is a no-brainer. But unfortunately, in the political atmosphere we're in anymore, it's everything just seems to be a struggle.
Yeah, I know. When I go home to Cleveland, to visit family. I use the public transit. Anytime we go downtown, we take the Rapid down. I take the bus over to the Rapid station, the Rapid down into the city, and you go to the Browns games or the Indians games or whatever. But it is something that we, every time we go, and we don't live there anymore, but we use it, and so does everybody else, because it's convenient. It runs on time. You know when it's coming and going. We need to build that. We need to build that here in Central PA.
Absolutely, and we need some dedicated funding for it. We're looking for a dedicated funding bill of $1.65 billion, and that's not just, you think of that number and wow, that's a huge number. That's not just for buses. That's for bridges. That's for roads. That's the whole transit infrastructure in itself. And, it's really not that large of a number when you think about it.
Yeah, no, especially when you're looking at the cost of transit as a whole. If we can get cars off the road so we don't have to update, be repaving all the time or rebuilding bridges or expanding, because, there's this area where I'm at is the fastest growing county in the state. If you don't have to keep expanding, that's a savings as well. So for me, the vision going forward is a smart one. Now, you talked about Act 89 that evidently is going to expire next year. What happens
Correct.
if this expires?
Well, if it expires and we don't have a dedicated funding source, our funding is going to be cut. We're going to be looking for areas, scrimping and scraping and trying to just get by with any kind of funding we could get. So it's vital. We can't let it expire. And that's why today you saw groups there that they were transit riders from Pittsburgh. They were transit riders from Philadelphia. Many different groups. You see some of the Teamsters there and other people. This is a topic that needs to be discussed now for, as you said, the long term. And it needs to be addressed right now, and we need to figure this out.
Yeah, there were a number of people that I talked to, people with disabilities, who that is their lifeline, their ability to get to the store, to get the doctor's appointments, to lead a life of some worth. It's about getting around. It's about logistics of movement, and if you take that away, their lives basically come to a standstill. So let me ask you this, because one of the arguments I get against public transit is, well, it can't fund itself. Because you've gone back and said, look, we need a dedicated stream of funding to help pay for this. I've always taken the position that public transit shouldn't operate at a profit, that it's a common good. It's something we should be doing regardless of if it's bringing in profit or not, because it's part of the commons and it's what we need to do. As president of the ATU Local 168, what's your argument in this? Is this something that should be a profit motive, or is this a common good thing, or can we do both on a certain level?
Well, it's not profit-driven, and it shouldn't be profit-driven. We have so many different programs. Our seniors ride for free. All of our seniors in Pennsylvania, you ride for free if you get a card. And that doesn't matter if you're in Scranton, Pennsylvania, or if you're in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. You use the same card, a senior card, and you ride free. And our seniors get there. Our reduced fare cards for our people with disabilities, getting them to where they need to go as well, whether it be shopping. A lot of them work. We get them to work, from work. And it's not just the big buses you see there. We also have our paratrans, our smaller buses that, that take people to and from doctor's appointments, chemotherapy, dialysis, everything. It's not something profit driven. It's a necessity. It needs to be there. And, we should all be grateful that it is there and realize what we have. Yeah. And, continue to try to better it.
That's why I ask you about this Act 89, if it's allowed to go away. And my fear is that we have, the political divide that we have, that this is something that's allowed to just expire and go, well, sorry, it didn't happen. And they actually destroy public transit in the making, which I think would be disgraceful. How do you see this playing out? Is that something that's possible without people being outraged?
Without people being outraged, no. I think a lot of people would be outraged. And whether you ride transit or not, I guarantee you have family members, friends, somebody somewhere along the line that relies on transit. And you may not realize it, but you ask around and you're going to see how many people actually do rely on transit just in your own network. And it would be a huge disgrace. Yeah. And that's why, like I said, our president, John Costa of the Amalgamated Transit Union, is leading this fight for funding, not only in Pennsylvania, but all throughout the United States. And we have a great man at the helm. He replaced another man that was a legend, Larry Hanley. And, we just continue to fight this fight for everyone involved in this in transit. And like I said, Rick, believe it or not, if you think you don't know anybody that relies on transit, just start asking around, and you'll realize how quick that changes.
Yeah, my fear is that this is allowed to just expire, and well, we couldn't get anything done, we couldn't come to an agreement, and then the people who are the most vulnerable are the ones that suffer, which sadly that tends to be the way things go anyway. The website transitforallpa.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can check out transitforallpa.org. What's the marching order? What are you hoping folks will do going forward? Is this a call your legislators thing? Is this letters to the editor? What's the hope out of what you guys did today and what you're doing going forward?
All of the above. You can call your legislators. We hope that everybody would call their legislators and express to them how important to have the funding for transit. Letters to the editor. You could join riders groups are popping up all over the state, not just in large areas in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but we have them. We have them in Scranton as well, and there's one coming aboard in Harrisburg, and they're all over the state. There's many things that you could do, but calling your legislator is the first step, and let them know how important this is to everybody.
Yeah, you said Pittsburgh and Philly, and generally what happens, at least in Pennsylvania and a lot of states, they pit the urban areas against the rural areas, and this becomes a whole political football. But there's public transit in every one of the 67 counties in Pennsylvania, right?
That is correct. There's public transit in all the counties.
So, if Act 89 does go away, it's going to affect, Cumberland, Adams, Franklin. It's going to affect the more rural counties as well and citizens in those. Because I don't want to get it's just Philly and Pittsburgh. It's not. It's every county that's going to be affected by it.
Absolutely. All 67 counties.
Dave, I appreciate you taking some time. I hope folks will check out transitforallpa.org. Again, we'll get links out on social media on how you can do that. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Dave Kaczmarek, president of the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 168. Again, transitforallpa.org, the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the industrial workers of the world between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the things that always infuriates me, and I've talked about this over the years, the fact that we get people who get elected to Congress or the Senate, work in regulatory bodies, and then that swinging door, or as my friend Jeff Hauser says, the revolving door of people in and out of government, back to lobbying firms, back to government, who take that power and influence and, well, profit off of it. And the thing that is most infuriating to me is, I get when corporate America does it because it's corporate America, but when foreign countries get to lobby our government, it's one of those things that kind of freaks me out. I'm going, do I really want China paying lobby firms to lobby our representatives for their interests and, well, not ours? And that's one of these stories on this Chinese tech giant Hikvision that's gotten a little bit of attention, and here to share some thoughts on, well, what's going on with Hikvision and who's behind some of the lobbying. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's always great to be with you.
So this Hikvision, who I thought we had banned, they're banned, right?
Yeah, more or less. They're banned from federal procurement or federal contracts, but they can schools still utilize them. There's lots of other private sector and municipal firms that still utilize them for security. But yeah, it's essentially a state-controlled entity from China that provides high-tech surveillance equipment. So that's like letting the fox into the hen house, I think. But
that's like delivering the hens to the fox's house.
Yeah. It just seems kind of, and again, I want to preface all of this by saying this is a quarrel with the Chinese government and the way in which it conducts itself and supports its businesses and has human rights and other privacy practices that are vastly different than what we value in the United States. But in no way should there be any entity in the United States using Hikvision knowing the Chinese government's surveillance record and the fact that Hikvision is intimately connected with the Chinese government. And of course, as you point out, the story here is that, it's bad enough that this is happening. It was good that Hikvision at least got banned from federal procurement in 2018. But there's 3 former senators, members of Congress, David Vitter, Toby Moffett, and I guess Barbara Boxer for a while, who were lobbying on behalf of Hikvision to weaken this, and that to me is just jaw-dropping. That former public officials, would do that and would represent a foreign entity that is backed by a government that doesn't have friendly intentions towards the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I said, well, there's David Vitter. Now I know what he's doing. And sadly, you go into a lot of these lobby firms, and not just, this is an attack on David Vitter. It's an attack on almost everybody who leaves public office, because the first job they usually end up going back is exploiting their connections by going to these lobby firms, which have grown so massive, so powerful, and the amount of money spent on lobbying our elected leaders to get other people what they want instead of we the American people is just enormous, and it's one of those things that just infuriates me.
Yeah, same here. And we should also say this isn't limited to Hikvision.
Nope.
I mean, there are many Chinese entities that have hired high-powered U.S. Lobbying firms to act on their behalf, trying to get them made eligible for federal procurement contract for things like transit for buses and rails. I'm thinking of the Chinese railroad company CRRC or the Chinese bus company BYD, and they have lobbyists on both sides of the aisle who will interact with members of Congress and try to persuade them that it's a good idea to send tax dollars to these companies because they can do it cheap. But what they don't tell you is that there are other consequences to that. Like, we lose jobs, we lose technology, we lose industrial capacity, and a lot of this stuff gets made by workers in China who are exploited and in environmental conditions that are adding a lot of pollution and carbon and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere as well.
So let me ask you the $1 million question then, and this is where I keep coming back to, whose fault is it? Is it the Chinese government who's figured out how to play our system, or is it us for allowing the Chinese government, the communist Chinese government, to lobby our elected officials? Whose fault is this? I generally, having grown up Catholic, generally blame myself. So I'm of the mindset that it's our fault. We in no way should be allowing the communist Chinese government to lobby our elected officials.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's enough sin to go around, Rick. So I don't think anybody should take this very personally, but I do think that on us to establish the rules under which we want to operate, or the value system that we want to enshrine in the United States. And you're right. If every country would act according to norms, that would be great. That would be super awesome. But that's simply not the case. And having that expectation, I think, is a little naive based on what we know about actors around the world like Iran or North Korea or Russia or China. And so we need to take some action. And if we can do it with allies, all the better. But we shouldn't just count on China to restrain itself, because we've talked about this. We thought that opening trade, not you and me, but the elites thought that opening trade with China would bring about democracy and much more attention to human rights and these global norms in China, but simply has not worked that way.
Well, it has brought attention. We now know some of this stuff goes on. It's that the Chinese Communist government doesn't care. Because there's nothing we can really do and there's nothing that we're doing that's going to really hold them accountable other than blocking their stuff, which, as you said, on the federal level, we're not buying any of Hikvision stuff. But I guarantee they're in our houses across the country, which to me, I don't know that I feel comfortable. And it may be just my paranoia, but I don't know that I feel comfortable having the Chinese Communist government have access to my house at some level, because I don't know what they're capable of doing. Or is that too paranoid?
It's not too paranoid. And knowing the sophistication of cyber intrusions, we ought to expect that, actually. But what you don't want to do, again, is give the keys to the car to an entity that has deep ties to the Chinese military to do this. And when they say trust us, it's actually
run.
No, they ultimately answer to the Chinese government and nobody else. And again, I'm not vilifying China or Chinese people here, but we must understand that when the Chinese government is collecting this, it's not doing out of good intentions.
No, look, I've always said, look, they're playing to win.
Yeah.
They're doing everything they can possibly do. A little cheating, a lot of cheating, but they're doing everything that they can do to win. And it's us we've made the decisions to not fight back in a lot of this. I mean, we're in an economic war, and for the most part, our generals, the corporate America, they're like, yeah, okay, well, we're happy with losing because we're profiting from it. Which is why I'm now finally glad to see that people are going, no, we need stronger Buy American provisions. I was thrilled to see New Jersey saying, look, we're going to pursue Buy American to make sure our roads and bridges are made with American-made products. That's a good start.
Yeah, it is, and it's a big victory. Congratulations to Governor Murphy and to the Democratic legislators there. When we, with some allies in New Jersey, tried to push this bill a few years ago, Chris Christie vetoed it. No surprise, and so we're glad that Phil Murphy signed it. And it is aligned with what New York did and Andrew Cuomo several years ago. Pennsylvania has a preference for steel in its law, and we're trying to ensure that other states maximize the jobs benefits of their procurement dollars. We've had some successes elsewhere in Texas, and we're looking to get something across the finish line in Maine this year. But it's because not all the dollars that are invested in infrastructure come from the federal government. A lot of that does come from states itself, and so we want to make sure that they're doing the right thing and reinvesting in the United States as well.
I mean, it just seems like common sense. I mean, especially you said Pennsylvania has a preference for American-made steel. You should have a preference for Pennsylvania-made steel and a mandate for American-made steel.
Yeah. Well, I think it is pretty strong, Rick, from what I understand about the Pennsylvania-made steel. I don't know the details of it, but I think they are generally doing the right thing on that in Harrisburg. It's some other capitals that we tend to have a harder time with. But the Buy American thing, to your point, it is popular now. It was so popular. I mean, you know what's going on in Texas with voting laws and all stuff like this is something that Greg Abbott and the state legislature in Texas actually agreed on, was to do stronger Buy America, particularly for their institutions of higher education as they're making procurement decisions as well.
Yeah, it's it's another one of those nonpartisan issues that we shouldn't have to fight over. It just should be as a matter of course. Now, as we're moving towards the new technologies, as we're rebuilding our infrastructure, as we're doing all those things, for me, the manufacturing should happen here. The innovation should be happening here. But sadly, as we're moving, and I think people are waking up, especially with the record temperatures coming out of the West. And today was not all that cool in my neck of the woods. Climate change is real. And I think people are waking up to the reality that it's just not hot because it's summer. It's freaking hot. When India or Pakistan's got a 126-degree day, you got problems. Siberia's got like a 119-degree day. You got problems. So we've got to address those. And for me, the idea of addressing climate change starts with, our vehicles, which we are so far behind China on, our solar panels, which again, we've lost decades in being able to dominate that arena. So for me, we got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, we do. We are far behind in both manufacturing and in kind of retail sales with respect to electric vehicles and to electrify forms of transportation that would vastly reduce greenhouse gas emissions going into our atmosphere. And that's one of the big keys. And so I think the challenge that we have is China has such a head start. 70% of the batteries that go into EVs are made in China. Okay. And so we need to double down on our efforts and partner with the private sector, but we need to infuse cash into this process because we don't want to depend on China for an electric vehicle future in the United States. That's one area where we still have manufacturing in the United States. We still have American nameplates. We have some foreign companies that have manufactured here as well. And China hasn't had a lot of success in exporting its vehicles to the United States. But when it comes to electric vehicles, that could be very different. That could be very different because they have a head start. It's heavily subsidized at the governmental level, so they can bring in electric vehicles, sell them cheap, and wipe out the competition. I think we have to be very, very careful here. We definitely need to give our workers, our manufacturers, a fighting chance here. We have to make sure that we have fair trade practices, and also that those vehicles coming in from places like China aren't made with exploited labor, have supply chains that are sustainable and that respect human rights, and that aren't subsidized heavily by the government at the expense of our own industry here in the United States as well.
Yeah, I don't think people understand just how important the auto industry is to this country from a manufacturing standpoint. And I would also argue from a national security standpoint. If you don't have that kind of a large capacity manufacturing ability, who knows what happens if you get into some kind of a shooting war. I hope it never happens, but lessons from the past tell me we need to have this manufacturing. But I think a lot of people don't think about how important the auto industry is. And look, like it or not, electric vehicles are coming. They are the future. And we I think, want to be somewhere in that ballpark. And as you pointed out, we're way behind.
100%. We need to be there. I can't wait for an American-made electrified fleet to come out. Has to have all the charging capacity that we need to make consumers feel comfortable and to get rid of range anxiety. But here's the thing about the auto industry. I'm glad you pointed out. You can go back, obviously, to World War II and the retooling and the unbelievable arsenal of democracy that was built up in there. But you can look to last year in the pandemic, and who could you call on to make ventilators if you needed a pinch? Ford. I mean, it's like the workers are highly skilled. They have extraordinary facilities. There's a lot of R&D. There's a lot of engineering know-how. You need that type of capacity in the United States. And if you're not manufacturing vehicles here, you're going to lose it. You are totally going to lose that. And we don't want to put ourselves in being a position of being dependent on China or other countries to supply this at such a critical time. This is about security and about jobs. Both, I think, are incredibly important as we are seeking to meet our climate goals as well.
No, I'm right there with you. At the end of the day, I've always been a supporter of domestic production for domestic consumption. We make what we need. We trade for the things that we can't make, and that's how your global trade goes. But sadly, we've had leaders who, as you said from the beginning, thought that, hey, we could bring China and make them like us. That's never going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. And look, one of my great fears, going back to where we started this, is the kind of security state that China has become, but who they are. I still value my privacy. I still think as a country, we value that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, I'll just say one tangible thing that's coming up that we ought to look at is this infrastructure and the other spending and potentially in the reconciliation. Now, we do have, as we're talking about these state Buy America laws, there are some federal Buy America laws, too, that govern some of the spending. But some of the categories that this bipartisan group has agreed on or that we're looking at here isn't necessarily covered by Buy America right now, like broadband or some of this electrification stuff, depending on how they structure it. So one of the tasks that we have as we move ahead, and we're working with our partners on this, is to make sure that as an infrastructure bill comes through and as reconciliation comes through, that we make sure that those tax dollars are invested here in the United States when we're buying the fiber optic cable or the electrical grid equipment or the electric buses that should be made in America by American companies or the transit or any of that. That we got to make sure that we're keeping it made in America.
No, to me that's paramount. That's the important part of this. It's the jobs. It's the economic activity that comes out of it. Most certainly, without question. But Scott, I appreciate the time, the information. As always, great stuff.
You bet. Have a great night, Rick. Thanks for having me on as always. Appreciate it. Thanks
so much. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website, americanmanufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media on how you can check that out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Hello, I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. A union of over 1.4 million strong and growing, AFSCME is gaining improvements in the workplace all across America. And right here in the Commonwealth, more than 95,000 AFSCME members make Pennsylvania happen. Highways, libraries, hospitals, parks, offices, prisons, classrooms, museums, courtrooms. You'll find AFSCME members at work in all these places and many more.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
Today's AFSCME members take on public service jobs as diverse as they are, not for the recognition, but for a better Pennsylvania. For more information, please visit our website at AFSCME13.org. Labor is changing, so is your labor union. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Ralph Waldo Emerson told of a dinner guest who went on and on about the virtue of honesty, offering his own life as a model of perfect rectitude. The louder he talked of his honor, said Emerson, the faster we counted our spoons. That's my reaction to the cacophony of phony piety arising from Republican governors and legislators who are trying to enact more than 250 new state laws to stop Black, Latino, Asian American, Indigenous, and other non-Caucasian voters from casting ballots. Yet they proclaim, we're not racist, we're righteous crusaders protecting the sanctity of the vote. Really? So why are they specifically targeting people of color with their repressive voting restrictions? For example, panicky Republican lawmakers in Georgia tried to outlaw any early voting on Sundays. Odd. Why? It's a flagrantly racist attack on the black church. For years, a joyous civic tradition called Souls to the Polls has played out in southern black churches on Sundays prior to Election Day. After the sermon and prayers, congregants, ministers, musicians, and others in the church family travel in a caravan to early voting locations to cast ballots. It turns voting into a civic, spiritual, and fun experience. What kind of shriveled soul tries to kill that? Apparently, the same shameful souls in the Georgia GOP who want to stop local groups from providing water and snacks to citizens forced to wait for hours in line to vote. They're actually trying to make it a crime to give water to thirsty voters. Hey, Republicans, what would Jesus do? This is Jim Hightower saying the goal and duty of every public official ought to be to maximize voter turnout. After all, the more Americans who vote, the stronger our democracy. But there's the ugly political truth. Republican officials no longer support democracy. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said at the beginning, I listening to right-wing drivel today, and it was all about the division. It was all about, the woman who looked mad during the national anthem. It was all about, the crime surge. Nothing about, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans filibustering, talking about the For the People Act. Because look, they're doing a great job in the states of rigging the 2022 elections. Here to share some thoughts on, are we ever going to see anything on the For the People Act? And is it going to come up again? I have Democrats just gone, okay, next. Here to share some thoughts, I've asked our good friend Harvey Kaye to come talk with us. Harvey is a professor of democracy. I think one of my favorite titles ever, the professor of democracy at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. He's also a fantastic author. He's written Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, The Fight for Four Freedoms, and Take Hold of Our History, as well as the FDR book on democracy. Harvey, thanks for taking time for us.
Always take time for you. Always take time.
You've actually written more books than I think I've read. I'm kidding, but you got a long list there, and I hope folks will take a look at them. But let's get to this voting thing, because this is pretty important. Pretty important who's going to be able to vote in 2022. At this point, if I'm chalking up the lines on the game, the Republicans are kicking the Democrats behind.
Yeah, definitely kicking. I mean, I don't think we're prepared intellectually and mentally and emotionally for exactly what we're up against. In other words, I don't think we quite grasp that there are folks, and otherwise known as Republicans, who absolutely could care less about, well, first of all, I don't think they subscribe to the idea of the United States as a democracy in the making. Okay, I don't want to call it, a made democracy, a democracy in the making. I remember years ago, I'm going to mind my going off a little bit on this. Years ago, must have been back in the 80s, and I was in the library, and I came across a magazine whose title I'm blanking on this minute, but it was the magazine of the John Birch Society. And at the time, they were still, I believe, in Belmont, Massachusetts, but they were moving to Appleton, Wisconsin, which is about 35 miles south of here, which is also where Joe McCarthy happens to be buried. And I'll never forget how insistent they were in their editorials that the United States was never intended to be a democracy. It was to be a republic, which, by the way, in the late 18th century, the line between a republic and a democracy was both minimal and significant. Minimal to the extent that a republic was decidedly not to be a monarchy or an aristocratic order. It was to be, if you like, a place where at least manhood suffrage might well prevail. And basically the founders had in mind a white manhood suffrage. Well, the imperative that's built into the idea of the original republicanism was very radical. And the majority of Americans, in the wake of reading Thomas Paine's Common Sense and the preamble to those opening paragraphs of the Declaration, they actually believed that they were involved in the making of a democratic republic. Well, here we are, right? 245 years later. My math is off, probably 200. Right? Is that it?
Yeah, right there. Yeah. Good job.
240. Yeah, that's pretty impressive, wasn't it? 245 years. I got to remember that number.
Gold star.
Right. 245 years later. And I think the John Birch Society idea has come to prevail inside. I mean, it's clearly that the Republican Party is the John Birch Society today in the 21st century.
Yeah, but isn't that the whole argument for originalism? I mean, isn't that what the Scalias of the world were preaching about original intent, and what the Federalist Society goes on about as well? Same idea.
Yeah, right. Well, and even the likes of Susan Collins right now, basically, that we're going to leave all these, because if you read the Constitution closely, it says that the states have basically control over the sort of electoral process and so on, but clearly, in the wake of the 60s, my generation probably believed we had come to the point of transcending the states' rights that had for so long, first of all, defended and gone to war over slavery, and later, what was established in the late 19th century as the Bourbon regimes. I mean, we probably believed we had finally transcended that. And what we've seen now for the last 50 years is really a war on the democratic ideals of the New Deal, and especially then on top of that, the Great Society years and the struggles for civil rights and voting rights, Medicare and Medicaid, immigration reform. I mean, it's just amazing. And here we are now. And I thought year after year of these last 45 years that the Democrats would have somehow gotten it into their heads that they were not just one of two political parties, that they were the party of FDR. And what had made FDR so successful was his willingness, though he used the word occasionally, but the willingness to go radical. And that is radical in defense of democracy, and that the only way to defend democracy was to enhance it. It's as simple as that. And what we've been doing is fighting a kind of defensive campaign for all of these years. And I have to say that I believe the Democrats are in good part culpable for where we are today. If they had stood up, I'm sorry, I know I'm going on, but this has been on my mind all day.
Right. If I could stop you on that point, because you mentioned something that caught my attention, that the answer was more democracy. that we weren't shutting things down. Is this the argument for getting rid of the filibuster then? Because I've been saying for a while it's been used to stop progress on a number of fronts. The Senate has been the place where democracy goes to die because of this filibuster. Is that not now? You go. Because the argument I get from my Democratic friends is, well, we can't get rid of the filibuster because when they take power, they're going to destroy Social Security and Medicare and all of those things, which probably is true. But I don't doubt that Mitch McConnell would destroy it anyway. Is that not the argument, though? The idea of more democracy?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, we now to go back to your original thoughts, the For the People Act is absolutely essential, by the way, just to get back to the Voting Rights Act and to give it all the more, meat, you might say, to give it all the more heft. Because clearly, when they ripped out that element of the Voting Rights Act,
the preclearance,
right? It was obvious that you couldn't just literally restore preclearance. You had to go beyond it. You had to literally, and here we are. And I'm sure you and I fully agree that it's not simply a matter of the For the People Act. That's a kind of baseline for restoring democratic life in America. It's also, and I will insist on this, that it's no less important, but no less likely right now to pass the PRO Act. I mean, if you do not have, look, where we are today, 45 years, almost 50 years after the declarations of war against labor made by the likes of David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, the New Right of Reagan, if we haven't realized that the greatest enemy, that the Republicans have always had in their minds as the agents of big business is the labor movement. The labor movement was and is the means to maintain, if you like, true civil society and to stand up. How else are we going to stand up to big business, to big corporations, right? Not to mention, you would have thought the Democrats would have figured out the only way they're going to ever overcome the utter imbalance in the U.S. Senate, given the likes of states like, Wyoming and the red states with their 2 senators each, in spite of their lower population numbers, that the only thing to do is to make sure that your troops, and I mean civilian troops, are ready to go in elections. And who are the foremost canvassers? What organizations have been so adamant about making sure the Democrats at least try to win elections? It's been the labor movement, whether it was the industrial unions of the past or the teachers unions and the nursing unions of today. I mean, what does it take for Democrats to realize that we are in a crisis of democracy, not unlike that which Lincoln confronted in 1860, that FDR confronted in 1932 and then 33 when he took office? I mean, what does it take? So, the question we face now is, okay, if we can't get the For the People Act, we can't get the PRO Act, what the hell do we do? And so I'm putting all my last hopes, you might say, in this infrastructure question, because the infrastructure plan that he originally proposed, not this bipartisan thing, which is actually dangerous. I mean, really, really dangerous. Why? Because it has built into the possibilities of privatizing public assets.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was the question of how do you pay for these things? They won't allow for the higher taxes.
Right.
So they've actually built into it the possibility of handing over public assets, to selling off public assets. And I don't mean paintings in art. I don't mean paintings in art museums, which themselves are public assets. I'm talking about, look, Indiana sold off its toll road, right? I mean, how many other states, people look closely. Chicago, I think, sold off their parking arrangements.
No. In fact, that came up today. I was at a rally in Harrisburg talking about public transit. And I had asked one of the people from Pittsburgh, how are you addressing the privatization issue? Because Pittsburgh had privatized their transit authority, their parking authority. And in their contract, it specifically says you can't increase transit without compensating us for the lost revenue of people not parking in our garages and in our spaces. Because they're smart. They figure this stuff out. They know every angle on how to make sure that their profits are secure. And the kid was like, I'd never heard of that. I go, you should probably be able to answer that question because it's going to pop up.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's my let's imagine for a moment that despite the gaffes or whatever else, that Biden and the Democrats are serious about the infrastructure plan, that this bipartisan thing is just basically to show Manchin how uncooperative the Republicans are. I mean, I'm grabbing at straws here. Let's hope that it's Biden's effort, last gasp, to do some kind of bipartisan signing. The fact is that if we don't go big, and he'd already come down off the necessary figures of the 2.3
2.2, I think it was.
Yeah, and it had come down to what, 1.3 in the short term. If we don't do that, it isn't because we need a victory. We actually need to start addressing the physical infrastructure and the social infrastructure that he introduced into the discussion of into the whole discussion of infrastructure. Moreover, I probably told you this before, and this was a lesson of the New Deal years, a major lesson of the New Deal years, that if you want to transcend the crisis that we confront right now, which was exacerbated to the nth degree by the Trump administration, of dividing Americans by race, ethnicity, and faith, if you're going to try to transcend that, you're not going to do it by way of telling people to redeem the soul of America. You're not going to do it by talking about unity. You're going to do it by bringing Americans together in nation-building projects and endeavors, okay? That they will see that what they can accomplish in solidarity, not simply by watching nice speeches about unity. You may hear the anger in my voice. I am seriously angry and worried about the future. I tweeted today or yesterday, I said, I really had hoped that 2021 was going to be a year where I did not have to resort to my hero Thomas Paine's lines, "These are the times that try men's souls." And it keeps coming. It's haunting me like every hour, as if you could repeat a tweet every hour, I'd just repeat.
That would be it. That would be on a loop. But here's the thing, and I agree with you 100%. You need to make people's lives better. We need transformational changes, and you need a direction. And I fear that the Republicans understand that better than the Democrats do, which is why they've drug out this negotiation. And I still expect them to kill the bipartisan bill at some point in the future anyway.
Yeah.
But they get this. They don't want that kind of unity, that kind of national direction, because they're happy right where things are at.
Yeah. Well, here's the bright spot in the midst of all this fog.
No, wait. No, you've got a bright spot?
Yes, I do. And I think this is noteworthy, in fact. Look, for the first time, I think Pelosi has finally realized that she has to recognize that maybe AOC and her allies, the squad, are serious, that if indeed they're going to throw this bipartisan plan in front of the House and the Senate, that she has got to listen to those folks, because they're going to vote no if that's what the only thing they're offered. So there's this idea now that they're going to hold off on that. Even if the bipartisan one gets through the Senate, they're going to hold off
right
in the House up until, so that they could literally pass the reconciliation bill. That would be the much larger.
That's the aspirational bill
at the same time. And by the way, I can't imagine Bernie and the squad this time bending to the will of the likes of Chris Coons. Okay, I'm glad you're laughing, because I find him a joke and an embarrassment. Okay, and what's worse is should be an embarrassment to Biden. Biden should be able to call Coons in and say, "Get off your ass, get in line. This is ridiculous."
Good slap upside the back of the head, like
You
they used to
bet.
do in the old days.
Yes, you bet. Where you know what? Vietnam War aside, where's Lyndon Johnson when you need him?
No, I say this all the time. Even you go back through the last couple of Democratic or the last couple of Republican leaders, Tom DeLay, Newt Gingrich. They knew how to whip people in the line.
Right. Whatever happened to the term? What happened to the term whip? Remember?
Yeah. Maybe we should send him one. But here's the thing, and this is where I think I'm hoping that the more we talk about this and the more people wake up to the reality that something has to get done, and in big ways. I mean, people need to see that life is going to get better, because 2022, again, I don't think we're going to get anything on voting. People have to have a reason to come out, especially in that midterm election. Yeah. And if things aren't better, I fear bad things.
Yeah, look, if Biden were younger, I'd tell him to get out and start doing the Trump rallies himself. But he's physically not up to it. I think that's pretty apparent. And Harris is utterly uninspirational. Utterly uninspirational.
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
But the thing is that's not Biden's shtick. I think Biden has done the right thing. We may disagree on this.
Yes, I'm sure we do.
I think him coming to work, doing the job, and not getting involved in the heated rhetoric right away, I think that was the right thing.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I just said to someone, I guess it was yesterday, we had a friend over the house, and I said, it's the thing we have to hope is this, that Trump can still capture television attention. Yes, Trump has literally this most devoted cult following that I've ever seen in my life, in the past 70 years. Well, I wouldn't have seen anything as an infant, but all these decades. But it is the case that it is hard to imagine him putting together an electoral victory. I'm not even sure that he'll garner the nomination. But I'm going to tell you now. I gave you the bright spot. Let me give you the worrisome stuff. Okay. So I've just read Josh Hawley's book, The Tyranny of Big Tech, and everyone can laugh that that Hawley went way out on a limb in favor of Trump. But I'll tell you, Josh Hawley is a very smart character
and a very scary one.
A very scary one. And by the way, he is the one figure who can merge the evils of Trump and the imagination of Reagan. This book that he wrote, which I thought I'd be able to lambaste because I've done a review for the magazine Jacobin, I actually got blown away because he actually lays out a narrative of America at various points, which I could imagine having written myself. So here's this Republican who's already going against the grain of the Republican Party in key ways, which is exactly what Reagan did in the late 70s. And don't forget, I'm sure you realize that Reagan actually was not at all the hero for the Eastern elite in the Republican Party. They did not like him. George Bush was okay, but not Ronald Reagan. But Reagan had figured out the way you win is you run against your own party, okay? And he did it. And I think Hawley's prepared to literally pull a Trump-Reagan combination. And
I said from the beginning, Trump, on Inauguration Day, I said Trump's going to be bad. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be corrupt. The theft, the graft, all of that stuff, going to be front and center. The lies, all that we know, but we're going to get by him. The scary person, I said this on Inauguration Day, the scary person is the person who picks up all of his charisma and all the things that he was able to do, and then normalizes the insanity and the hatred and all the things that he has been. And Hawley, to me, is that guy who can do all that. And I think DeSantis is there as well. I think he's a scary figure as well.
Oh, God. DeSantis is, though, he can't win a national election. He's such an ugly character. And I don't even mean, he's such an ugly, he can't win a national election. But Hawley, coming out of Missouri, okay, as Reagan came out of Illinois and went into politics much later, Hawley is somebody to watch out for. Not in a good way, but to literally watch out for.
Scary, scary stuff. So last question I got for you, prediction wise, are we going to get anything on the voting rights, or is this something where one of the things I've been saying is Democrats better spend a lot of time and effort, maybe not so much trying to push something that's not going to get passed legislatively, but getting people registered and being able to leap the tall bounds of the obstacles that Republicans have put in place. Any predictions, any thoughts?
Well, you know what? I think the chances of a real victory in voting rights is about 20%.
You're going that high? All right.
Yeah.
20%.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of work to do. But Harvey, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff, my friend.
Great. This was fun, Rick, but fun in a way that's very worrisome at the same time.
Scary times ahead. Thanks so much, our good friend Harvey Kaye. Make sure you check out Harvey's work. He's written the book Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, The Fight for Four Freedoms, Take Hold of Our Democracy, and the FDR on Democracy book. You can get those on the other place that I hate to mention. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day SWAC leader Philip Murray beat back reports that the Little Steel strike had collapsed. Even as the steel companies were championing that the strike had been broken, Murray insisted that of the 90,000 workers involved, only 20,000 had returned to work in the mills that stretched across 7 states. He added they were mostly supervisors and foremen and not production workers. Murray leveled charges against Ohio Governor Martin Davey that the Ohio National Guard was being used as company police to smash the strike. Strike leaders added that the companies were staging dummy back-to-work parades. In fact, Labor Secretary Perkins had announced that it was the government's effort at mediation that had collapsed. But the steel magnates were on the offensive and had the backing of local politicians and police. George Mike, a Union man and disabled veteran, was the latest casualty in the anti-labor war. He was killed the day before at Maltrup Steel in Beaver Falls, Ohio, as picketers clashed with deputy sheriffs. In Indiana, police rushed to plant gates at Inland Steel to guard against new battles as 20,000 strikers prepared for the imminent forced reopenings of Inland Steel and Youngstown Sheet and Tube there. Both mills remained closed for weeks. In Warren, Ohio, police issued a warrant for CIO strike leader Gus Hall and 2 other strike leaders on charges that he was the brains behind a terrorist plot to blow up strike-bound steel mills. And at Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 2 separate dynamitings destroyed main water supplies, causing an immediate end to an attempted back-to-work movement there. The strike was far from over. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
A little sad to hear Harvey say only a 20% chance of getting something done on the voting rights side of things. And look, I've heard, I was at the Capitol today, and there were people who were still protesting that we need to audit the votes here in Pennsylvania. I guess there's a rally coming up. They're stuck with it. They're even though everyone's saying, no, there's no voter fraud, move along. They've basically bought the former guy's, his snake oil. And they're bent on it. Hey, look, it gives them something to do. It keeps them occupied. This way, they're not causing trouble in other areas. Just my thought. Now you're looking at the audits in Arizona. Maricopa County announced yesterday going to be replacing all of the voting equipment that they handed over to the private contractor who did the quote unquote audit. And this is where you go, was that the smartest thing to do? Just say, here's all of our stuff. How much is this costing the taxpayers in Arizona to come up with the same results, and the results of there was no boogeyman? This was the most watched election, I would argue, in the history of elections. And I'm generally not one who goes, no, everything was fine. And I'm not saying everything is perfect. There are some things that we should be talking about. But the kind of things that I've had the Trump supporters throw at me just don't make sense. But we got to play this game. Also, this should make the Republicans happy. Evidently, a vote of 285 to 120, with 67 Republicans leaving the faithful. They passed legislation that will remove Confederate statues from the Capitol. So no more Confederate statues at the Capitol. Which, look, we shouldn't have had them to begin with. Traitors. You don't put traitors in the Capitol. You just don't. They didn't make it there on their own. Why would you put a statue there? Again, this is where you go back and look at the real history of the country and go, why is it that this happened? The people who wanted to rip us to shreds, we honor that? Crazy stuff. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the building trades is changing a little bit, and they're changing what will be the future of work in America. I saw this story and I'm like, really, a building trades union is talking about maternity leave for their workforce? I got to know more. So when we come back, we'll talk about that. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The threat is salt water creeping in from the ocean further into the Delta, now threatening to contaminate freshwater supplies for central and southern California.
Worsening drought conditions threaten drinking water supplies in California. Alarming heat wave hits the Siberian Arctic. Plus, grim UN draft report warns climate change tipping points are upon us, and the worst is yet to come.
All of that grim news, as usual, straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We have spent the last 2 decades in perpetual drought here, yet almond farmers in California have doubled in that time. Despite the fact that almond production alone uses more water than all the humans and businesses in San Francisco and Los Angeles combined. That wasn't a problem back when it rained. But now there simply isn't enough water to go around, and we have to make a painful choice, getting it to the people or getting it in the nuts.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, a big chunk of the U.S. over the past week or so has been in a terrible heat wave. But we should note, it is not just affecting the U.S.
No, it is not. As we go to air, climate scientists are expressing alarm at shockingly high temperatures broiling the Arctic. An intense and expansive heat wave has gripped parts of Siberia, northwestern Russia, and Scandinavia. Ground surface temperatures across Siberia this week shot up above 90 degrees Fahrenheit and spiked as high as 118 degrees in some areas.
90 and 100 degrees in the Siberian Arctic.
118 degrees in Siberia, rivaling Las Vegas during this most recent heat wave.
Wow.
And it's not over. The National Weather Service is forecasting, quote, a new record-breaking and dangerous heat wave for the Pacific Northwest, a region where there isn't widespread air conditioning. But there's also a chance that smoke from wildfires sparked by the extreme heat conditions could help by dimming some of the sun's heat. So, yay?
Yeah, we're being saved by wildfires? Really?
A new study confirms that, yes, man-made climate change is intensifying these extreme record-breaking heat waves in the U.S.
Who could have guessed it?
A Lawrence Berkeley National Lab analysis has concluded that man-made global warming has caused these rare heat events to be 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit hotter in most of the United States. New consequences are unfolding from the climate change intensified mega drought emerging in the West. In eastern Arizona, water levels in Lake San Carlos have fallen so low that fire crews can't use it to fight fires. In Sacramento, California, cutbacks in water releases from the state's reservoirs have severely reduced river flows, which in turn is allowing salt water from the ocean to intrude inland, threatening to contaminate fresh water supplies. State water officials have hastily hastily begun building an emergency barrier across a major waterway in the Sacramento River Delta to stop the saltwater creep, according to Ryan Reeves of the California Department of Water Resources in an interview with KCRA.
The emergency drought barrier is not one we take on lightly. I mean, it does include the word emergency in it. We consider it to be an emergency action. We would not be doing this project if it wasn't serious.
Meanwhile, a new draft report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change highlights that adaptation efforts are not moving fast enough. The massive draft report, obtained by Agence France-Presse and due out in 2022, is grim. It warns that the planet is rapidly approaching tipping points that could set off feedback loops that further amplify global warming, saying, quote, "The worst is yet to come." Some serious climate impacts are already baked in and will hit sooner than previously projected, fundamentally reshaping life on Earth in coming decades. And that's even if nations are able to cut the greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change.
You are grim today, Desi Doyen.
It includes water shortages and crop failures, deadly heat waves, ecosystem collapse, species extinction, and rising seas inundating coastal communities. The IPCC draft report also starkly warns that efforts to adapt and prepare for climate impacts are too slow. Quote, "Current levels of adaptation will be inadequate to respond to future climate risks." Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg, in an interview with AFP, found a ray of qualified hope.
It seems that many people are becoming more and more ready to tell it like it is. And we can, of course, not face this crisis unless we tell it like it is, unless we are adult enough to tell the truth. This could be something that could lead to something that could wake people up, which is very hopeful.
What does it say when we have to turn to Greta Thunberg for good news to cheer us up? Good Lord. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. We'll be off for a week or so until after the July 4th holiday. Please have a safe, happy, and cool one if possible. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I always say, and this is not new, union job, better life. You want better life-work balance, get a union contract. Pretty simple to me. And in ways that, we haven't thought of in the past. And so when I saw this story by our friends over at the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, that they were pursuing a paid maternal leave program, a paid maternity program. I'm like, wow, I hadn't really thought of the building trades being on the forefront of expanding rights for work for female workers. Good stuff. We got to talk about it. That's why I've asked Jessica Podhola to come talk with us. She's the Government Affairs Director and the National Women's Committee member and chair of the Maternity Leave Subcommittee. Wow. In a lot of stuff of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. She's also the president of the Greater Kansas City Clue Network. Jessica, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk about maternity leave. It's something I'm pretty passionate about. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. So when do you have time to deal with kids with all of this other stuff that you're a part of? Wow.
That's what women do, right? We work, we clean, we birth babies, we take care of those kids. We also know that in order to make a stronger America for women coming up behind us, that we got to bring people with us. And sometimes that means we have to look at things in a new way and fight to change things. But I'm pretty lucky. I'm a member of the IUPAT, so we are probably one of the most progressive unions in the building trades. And our leadership, identified 6 years ago that we wanted to really concentrate growing in some of really exciting ways. We wanted to recruit women. We wanted to recruit African Americans, Hispanics. We wanted to recruit LGBTQ QIA. Like, we wanted to create workforces that actually reflected the communities in which we were working. And so our leadership invested in some national committees, and I was lucky enough to be selected to serve on the Women's Committee. And the first time we met, we talked about paid leave and how that is important not only to women. That's actually an issue that's important to men and women, to workers across the board.
Absolutely.
And the IUP, the IUPAT absolutely understands that.
Now, this is one of those issues, Jessica, that I've talked about over the years, that we're so far behind the rest of the industrialized world. When my wife was having our children, I wanted to stay home, and there was no paid option. In fact, we fell back on the Family Medical Leave Act, which is unpaid. But fortunately, thanks to the union job I had, I was able to save money and be home with the kids for those first couple of weeks. But we don't do a real good job in this country of helping families and doing that life-work balance. In fact, when I saw the ad that you guys put out, I started thinking about the industry that I work in the freight industry, and how things have changed because women are now coming in, and how the work expectations have changed. Because look, you've got kids and you're a guy, you better show up to work, because we don't care about your personal problems. We don't care about child care or any of that stuff. You get your butt to work. But now, as we're making more workplaces more diverse and bringing more women in, these policies, these family-friendly policies, have to be front and center.
They do. And I think the last year has shown us how important it is to have those types of policies in place, not just because of the pandemic, but working mothers represent 56% of workers that have left the workforce, even though we're only 49% of the workforce. And part of that is because we don't have access to childcare, or we don't have access to reliable childcare. Or for my members who have to be on a job site at 6 a.m., we don't have access to childcare early enough in the day. So, there are a lot of issues in our country that prevent us from being the family-friendly country that we think we are. But the job of the labor movement is to chip away and to make sure that we're out there fighting for policies that make work-life balance not only possible, but something that our members can thrive under. We don't want to create a situation where our members have to choose between having a career or having a family. Our members do dangerous work. They're around chemicals, they're up high on buildings, they're working with items that are heavy. We spend a lot of resources recruiting women into the trades because our contractors need them, they want them. And then when they start having babies, we say, thank you, see you later, bye-bye. No, there's got to be a smarter way to do that. And, I'm lucky. I am a member of the IUPAT, definitely the most progressive of the building trades unions. And about 6 years ago, our international decided that we were going to invest in some constituency groups, constituency building, right? We knew that we needed to become more diverse. We needed to become younger. We needed to develop programs that helped us recruit and retain a new workforce. In 2008, when the economy crashed and construction crashed, our union lost a lot of members, not unlike a lot of other construction unions. There are construction jobs in every city across this country tomorrow if you want to start, right? If you want to work hard, you can have a good career. But sometimes you have to be really intentional in developing programs and how those programs are going to fit in the bigger scheme of things.
Right. So what you're doing is, I go back to some of the old school union organizing where unions had hospitals and unions had built schools and daycare centers and things to take care of some of the problems that their workers were having. Right. So it sounds to me that you guys are thinking in that old school organizing vein, and how you help your members achieve a better life and deal with some of the obstacles. So walk me through some of the idea on this maternity plan that you guys are talking about. about? What is it that you're moving forward? Because look, as I understand, one of the first in the building trades to really be pushing this. So this could be what gets set across all of the trades and maybe, filter across the entire workforce. Walk me through some of it.
That would be amazing, right? To be fair, the iron workers have a maternity leave program, and they were the first in the building trades to do it. And good for them, because when they did it, it becomes easier for other labor leaders to begin to imagine what that might look like. Because, you start thinking about maternity leave, and you're thinking about funds, and you're thinking about how can we afford to do this? Well, the real question is, how can we afford not to? If we want to recruit and retain a strong, vibrant workforce, we're going to have to think outside the box. So let me get to the nitty gritty, because I think this is a really fantastic program. If you are a member in your health and welfare fund, in your district council, and you become pregnant, if you are unable to work, you're going to have your wages replaced at about 67%, capped at about $800 a week, which is tremendous. If you when you have your child, you're going to get that same wage replacement for about 6 weeks. If you have complications with your pregnancy or your birth, we'll extend that to 8 weeks. We're excited.
Yeah, it's a start. I mean, it's a start. But,
right.
And when you say, 6 weeks, you go, well, it's 6 weeks. It's 6 weeks more than we have now. But sadly, when I look at the other industrialized countries, you look at a country like France, where, they give people a year off to bond with their child. And because, again, they're much further down the road than we are. We still have this. And I had this conversation today with a friend. I'm going, because I was preparing for our discussion. And I'm going, I've always been, the child care was my wife's responsibility. I had to get to work to make money. That old school kind of mentality where the boss didn't care what I was going through. You get your butt here and you get the job done. I can't imagine having that kind of pressure on and having a child and not being able to get the child care we need or the assistance that you would need as well. I mean, to me, this sounds like a good start, but nowhere near the end of the road.
Yeah. It is not. It is nowhere near the end of the road. We would love to be able to provide this benefit for the totality of our membership, but we're not there yet, right? But the IUPAT strongly supports President Biden's 12-week paid leave plan.
It's what we need.
It's what we need. We support on local levels paid leave, on state level. We work with legislators on every level of government. This is a priority for us. This is something we talk to every single candidate that comes in front of us. How do you feel about paid family leave? And this was a priority for us prior to the pandemic, because you said something earlier. We tell our members that they deserve more. They deserve a life outside of work. And they should really not be living to work. They should be working to live. And that's the benefit of working under a collective bargaining agreement, right? You are able to actually work your 8, be paid fairly, have strong benefits, and have a strong family life. Maternity leave is a family issue. It is, for our members, I have a member here in Kansas City. Her name is Jordan. She is a glazer by trade. In fact, tomorrow she turns out and will become a journeyman glazer. So congrats to her. But a couple years ago, Jordan she got pregnant with her youngest son. And she was lucky because she had a great relationship with an employer who laid her off.
So she could collect unemployment.
Right. We didn't have any benefits to give her outside of a small disability check, right? So having a program like this in place means that the next Jordan won't have to slip in her life in order to have a child. She won't have to miss a step. Jordan's lucky. She had great support. She has strong union brothers around her. But too many of our members, they get pregnant, they can't work, they leave the union. And that's a loss not only for the IUPAT, that's a loss for our community. It's a loss of someone who's going to be able to have the resources to buy a house, or have the resources to pay their bills, or have the resources and the benefits to have a child. I tell people all the time, my story is a great union story. I came to the IUPAT immediately before I came to the IUPAT. I had my youngest child. My husband and I did not have health insurance. I made $50 a month too much to qualify for Missouri Medicaid. So then I had to pay cash for my kid. And we were working class poor. We were working class poor, scraping together $800 a month to prepay the hospital to have my daughter. I had to go back to work immediately after I had her. I didn't have the luxury of having a job that afforded me the ability to have savings, that afforded me the ability to have health insurance, and definitely didn't afford me the ability to stay at home with my daughter. The labor movement has got to remember that we've always got to be thinking about who's coming next. And the way that we grow the labor movement, the way that the labor movement returns to prominence in this country, is by remembering who's coming next.
Yeah.
What issues do we really have to tackle? Fair scheduling, childcare, affordable housing, comprehensive immigration reform, paid family leave. These are all issues that are not traditional building trades issues, but they're labor issues, and the IUPAT is going to lead on them.
At the end of the day, it always comes back to wages, hours, and conditions. Whatever those conditions may be. And look, I want to see us move in the direction of paid family leave, so that not just women who are bearing the children, but fathers as well can be part of that, and not be in a situation like you are. The sad reality in this country, I guess it's not sad, because I hear the story that you told from so many of my union brothers and sisters on how, again, like I said at the beginning, union jobs, better life. It's that simple. That's your bumper sticker if you need a bumper sticker. But too many people are struggling to get by, and too many people are struggling to make ends meet, and aren't fortunate enough to get the kind of jobs that we've been lucky enough to get. But the building trades have done a good job, I think, of expanding and bringing people in. And as you said, they've spent a lot of time and effort, especially at IUPAT, to bring in a diverse workforce and to train them. This is part of that as well. The training that the building trades does, I think, is so important to point out.
Every year in October, there is a conference. It is called Women Build Nations. It's the second largest conference in the construction industry in the world. We weren't together last year for obvious reasons, but the year prior, there were about 3,000 of us up in Minneapolis. And Sean McGarvey came, and my husband's a member of the Plumbers Union, and his president came, and our general president has been, and every single general president that attends that conference is blown away by the passion that these women have for building their communities and building their families. And the IUPAT is going to lead the way. We're going to continue to recruit women. We're going to continue to grow. And we're committed to doing that. And I'm super excited to see that happen. We've got a lot of women in leadership. But more importantly than that, we have men in leadership that listen to us and value and respect our opinions and think that our ideas are great and try to bring us along with them. So that's really important too.
Really great stuff, Jessica. I appreciate you taking some time sharing your story. Anything that we can do to help push this along on a broader scale? I know your union's doing this, and anything that you guys are moving on a workforce wide scale for people to be involved in?
Well, we have been pushing the PRO Act like mad, and just like every labor union across the country should be. It was about 74 years ago last week that the Taft-Hartley Act was enacted. President Truman, who is from my hometown, Independence, Missouri, was president when that happened. The IUPAT believes firmly that we've got to get that PRO Act to pass. And your previous guest nailed it. This infrastructure bill is not what we need it to be, and we need to make sure that there are strong worker protections in that bill. And everybody should go on the phone tomorrow and call Joe Manchin and tell him to make sure that there are.
Amen. I'm with you. Jessica, I appreciate the time. Really great talk with you. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Absolutely. Anytime, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Jessica Podhola. Make sure you check out their website, IUPATDC3.com. We'll get links on how you can check out their website and share some thoughts. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the industrial workers of the world between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, shocking story today. Evidently, the House Republican leadership is saying that they're going to oppose the creation of a select committee to probe into the January 6th insurrection. And you go, no shock there. And look, if you look, and this is where I don't blame them. I do not blame them. If I was committing a crime, if I was out there criming, I don't think I would want people looking into my criming. Now, here's the other side of that coin. If I was criming and someone was looking into my crimes, I might want to be part of it so I could, I don't know, change the narrative a little bit, maybe loosen the rhetoric, maybe justify my actions. So I'm interested to see how this is going to play out, what the strategy the Republicans are going to use on defending what was seditious behavior. They were trying to overthrow the functions of our government. And some of them got caught. Now, so far, really light slaps on the hands for the people convicted. As you probably knew that was going to happen. And look, they've sold out bigger fish, and the hope is down the road someone really gets some significant time. But so far, $500 fine, don't do it again, kind of nonsense. But I find it interesting that you got Scalise, the number 2 Republican, saying that the panel is likely to pursue a partisan agenda. Which makes them go, we're not going to play. The reason that it's a partisan agenda, just to kind of point this out, is that they were supporters of the former guy. You tried to paint it as it was Antifa. You tried to paint it as it was, anybody but the former guys crowd. It was the former guys crowd. It was the crowd that Josh Hawley and Lauren Boebert and other Republicans were whipping into a frenzy. The former president himself whipping people into the frenzy, firing them up, and then pointing them in the direction of chaos. And I'll never forget. I can't. This will never leave my mind. The fact that Trump said, we're going to go down there, like he was going to be leading the charge. Like George Washington standing up in the front of the boat in the freezing winter as they were crossing the Delaware, which didn't happen. But that's the image that he wanted to throw out there, that he was going to be leading the charge. And where did he go? He was watching the whole thing on TV, smirking and happy as can be at the chaos that he caused. Now we need to get to the bottom of it. Who made the decisions not to prepare for it? Since all of us knew it was coming. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.